Hey guys, today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite books of 2020. So, the year of 2020, I read a lot of fantastic books. I mean, of course, there were some books in there that I didn't enjoy that much. There were some books that were like maybe just average, and then of course there were the books that kind of blew me away and whatnot. So as I do every year when I do my favorite books of the year, I always divide it up into two categories to kind of make it, you know, equal and fair and whatnot. The first set of books that I'm going to be sharing with you guys are books that are brand new to me that were not published in the year of 2020. And then the second set of books that I'll be sharing with you guys will be books that were published in the year of 2020. So for each of those categories, I have chosen 5 books for each. So let's get going so this video ain't too terribly long. So starting with the books that are brand new to me that were published before 2020, at number 5 I have Fallen Skies by Philippa Gregory. Y'all know I freaking love me some Philippa Gregory. I need to read her books more often because I am pretty far behind at this point. But yeah, this year I did get around to Fallen Skies, and this is one of her like most early most early published books, like written back in like the early 90s, I want to say. But yeah, this book takes place after World War One, and we follow a young woman named Lily, who's like a stage singer, and a man named Stephen. Stephen is very wealthy and privileged. He was a soldier during World War One, and he has severe PTSD. So yeah, this book follows Lily and Stephen, and through a series of events, they do eventually wind up married pretty early in this book. But this is what you gotta know about this book. This book is essentially the unraveling of their marriage and this living hell that they're living with each other. And yeah, Lily, who is very young and naive, kind of just rushed into this marriage that she didn't particularly want to be in. And then yes, Stephen, like I said, he was part of World War One. He was a soldier, and he's suffering severe PTSD, and he has his own issues and dramas. But yeah, the PTSD is only exasperating things that are already terribly wrong with him to begin with, because he's very abusive and violent. He says a lot of mean things. He can kind of beat up on poor Lily on times. Yeah, this is the most unhealthy relationship you're ever going to read in your life, probably. But this book is just so utterly gripping and fascinating. I mean, these two characters, you do sympathize the most with Lily, obviously, but at the same time, both of these characters are highly unlikable. They have their moments of being highly annoying. But it's this whole unraveling of their marriage that turns into this living hell, like I said, and the two of them just, it's like, how do we get out of this situation? You know, can they even get out of this situation? And the great thing about this book, what I loved about this book so much, is Philippa Gregory, you know, taking this concept, you know, after a post-war scenario, and kind of this deconstruction of a post-war marriage and what comes after a war and whatnot. Because I even said this in my review for this book, that a lot of times books written during, you know, kind of World War One or World War Two, a lot of times authors will kind of romanticize a war, and they'll romanticize a relationship between like a guy and girl. And yeah, Philippa Gregory is like kind of going against that, and she's kind of showing the true nature of what war does to people, you know, physically and mentally. And yeah, you know, the consequences essentially of war, especially for the people who lived it and survived it. So I just really love this book, just so meticulously put together, so many twists and turns, and an ending, seriously, an ending to a book that is just utterly just jaw-dropping. At number 4, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Yes, I finally got around to Rebecca. I feel like I'm one of the last people in the world to read this freaking book, because this book is a classic for a reason, and I loved it. If you don't know what Rebecca is about, if you're one of the few people who hasn't read it like me, this book follows a young woman who goes unnamed through the entire book, you guys. We follow our narrator. She's a young woman. She meets an older man named Maxim de Winter. Maxim has just recently, like within the last year or so, he has recently lost his wife, Rebecca, who the title is named after. Rebecca's recently died, and he's a widower. He and the unnamed narrator, they hook up, they form an attraction, and they get married fairly quickly at the beginning of this novel. And this whole book is about our unnamed narrator. She's very suspicious about things that are going on at her husband's ancestral home. His home is called Manderley. And everybody just seems to have adored his first wife, Rebecca. Rebecca is like the epitome of virtue and perfection, and everybody loved her, everybody loved the parties she hosted. It just seems like everything was done in a particular manner. And the unnamed narrator, she feels like she just can't compete with the ghost, if you will, the ghost of Rebecca. She feels like she can't compete. She feels like she is not perfect, that she's not running things to a satisfactory manner that people are enjoying. So she's just really trying to cope with this new marriage, and trying to cope with, trying to get past the ghost of Rebecca. And yeah, there's just a lot of weird things that are kind of happening. She's learning a lot of information throughout the book. And this is just such a great classic, you guys. It is a classic for a reason. It definitely has that Gothic atmosphere to it. It can read. It's very chilling and haunting, and there's just something always lingering. There's something lingering there right at the surface that you're not quite sure what it is until things are kind of explained. And I love this book. I'm so glad I finally got around to it. It's a classic that's very easy to read and to get into. I definitely recommend it, especially if you have a hard time with classics. This is definitely an easier classic to dive into. At number 3, The Walking Dead Compendium number 4 by Robert Kirkman, and this is the final set here, the final compendium in this very, very huge and lengthy comic series by Robert Kirkman. I had a reread of the series at the beginning of the year, so that way I can read this final compendium here. As you can see, it is huge, and my arm is hurting even holding it. I love this graphic novel series, you guys. It is wildly impressive, just thrilling and exciting from start to finish. There's always so much going on. There's so much drama and angst, and yeah, you have your few comedic moments in there. So much action and adventure, and characters that I think you really come to love and understand and appreciate. But yeah, this final volume here in this huge series, it definitely just left me shaken and disturbed, and I was definitely left in tears in a few moments in this book. But at the end of the day, I left this whole series. I left the whole series being very satisfied, very impressed. I'm just really happy with how things ended. Of course, I felt like there were some little things that, I wasn't totally happy about it. Some things I wish had maybe been wrapped up a little bit. But at the end of the day, I was just very, very satisfied with this, especially as long, because this volume, for instance, collects issues 145 through 193. That's almost 200 issues of this, and that's pretty long. That's a lot to get through. But I felt very satisfied, and I was very happy. There's kind of like a bittersweetness to it as I finished this compendium. And yeah, reading these graphic novels, it kind of makes me so upset about the TV show, because I love the TV show so much, but the TV show has just changed so much, and it's like the way this particular compendium ends, it's like I don't know how the show is even going to be anywhere near as comparable to this, especially like on an emotional level, you know. But yeah, I'm so glad I finally got around to finishing The Walking Dead. Just fantastic from start to finish. If you have not picked up this series, I definitely recommend picking it up. I don't think you're going to be disappointed at all. At number 2, A Breath of Snow and Ashes by Diana Gabaldon. This is book 6, correct, in the Outlander series. I loved this book, you guys. It was so good. And without going into too terribly many spoilers, because like I said, this is book 6 in this very long series, and I don't want to sit and give away too many spoilers in case you've not gotten this far. But yeah, in this particular book, it is kind of the eve, if you will, of the American Revolutionary War. It's kind of just right around the corner. You see kind of the rising and growing tensions that are developing. And yeah, in this particular book, our main characters, Jamie and Claire Fraser, you know, they're kind of, you know, because Claire, like I said, if you've read these books, Claire comes from actually the 1940s, and she is actually a time traveler who has been kind of sent back here to the 1700s and whatnot. So her being from the future, she knows what is coming, and she's shared with her husband, you know, hey, there's this war that's coming, and I need to prepare you. So in this book, the two of them are just kind of trying to prepare, and their daughter Brianna and her husband Roger are here as well. And Brianna also knows something from the future as well, because before she time traveled to reunite with her mother and father, she found out that they were going to die in a fire of some sort. So she has kind of come back with the intention of trying to save them from this fire if she can, which has not happened just yet. She just knows that it will happen from like an article she read. So this book, there's a lot going on. It's very huge. There's so many different little plot twists and everything. So many characters. And this book, even though I did love this book, it's definitely a book that's trying to wrap up a lot of stuff that has happened in previous books before heading into kind of these next books, I'm assuming, because the next book, I believe, it sounds like we are heading directly into the American Revolutionary War. So a lot of stuff needed to kind of be tied up and wrapped up before we kind of head into a new chunk of a story. But yeah, I love this book. I'm always excited to read a new book in this series, and I'm slowly catching up. But yeah, very good. Diana Gabaldon, her writing, I just continue to be so impressed with her writing and just her craft. I like to imagine that she has a big board posted up with, like, you know, all the plots and characters and the timeline and whatnot, because there's just so much, and in the hands of any other author, this series and this book too could just be a total disaster and a total mess. But when you're reading, you never feel that way. You know, you never feel like Diana Gabaldon has lost hold or lost track of any given character or situation or event or whatever. It's like she always knows. And then, like, you may get some little tidbit at the very beginning of the book that, like, may come back in a big way somewhere in the middle or somewhere near the end. And I just love that about how she writes these books, how she crafts them. You know, it's a true craft what she's able to do with these books, I think, and I'm always just hooked and engaged, which is a good thing. And at number 1, guys, if you've not guessed this, I don't know where you've been the last several months on my channel, but yeah, at number 1 is the Poldark series by Winston Graham. And when I say the Poldark series, I do mean all 12 books. Yes, all 12 books from this gigantic series. It took me, what, 4 months? It took me 4 months to read the entirety of this series, you guys, and I freaking loved it. It's so obsessively fun to read and get into these books. If you don't know what the Poldark books are about, because I feel like a lot of people have no idea what they're even about, the Poldark books take place, if you want to know kind of the entire series, like I said, I'm not going to give no spoilers away, but like the very first book in the series takes place like after the American Revolutionary War, and then by the time you get to book 12, it's actually about 1820, something like that, 1825, something like that. So yeah, the whole of this series spans the course of of a couple decades. But yeah, for the purposes and context of this particular video, in the very first book, you're introduced to Ross Poldark. He is returning to Cornwall, England, where his ancestral home is, after the American Revolutionary War. So he's returning home, and he has every intent and purpose on marrying the love of his life, Elizabeth. But to his shock, the love of his life, Elizabeth, has decided to get engaged to his cousin Francis. Oh no. So poor Ross Poldark, he's just come back from this war where the British have lost. His ancestral home is kind of in ruins. He's lost the love of his life. And yeah, the first book in the series is him essentially trying to cope and move on. But the good news is he eventually does meet a young woman named Demelza, who he forms an attachment to, and this ain't really too much of a spoiler, but they do get married, and they're married through the entire course of the 12 novels. So, I love and adore these books, you guys. I first watched the TV series, and I just absolutely adore the TV series, so I was really excited to finally read these books. And I tell you what, if you've seen the TV series, these books, the series is a perfect adaptation, no joking. I was very kind of impressed and surprised by how close the TV show stuck to these books. Everything from just very specific scenes, very specific moments of dialogue. But yeah, these books are just so well written by Winston Graham. They're beautiful and descriptive. You really fall in love with these characters and the world of Cornwall, England, which is just so atmospheric and has a particular look and style and flair to it, if you will. Yeah, the relationship between Ross and Demelza is the heart and core of this series. I love all of their friends. I love all of the antagonists that enter into their lives. It's just such a captivating, quaint series, if you will. I mean, I think that's the perfect way to describe it, just captivating and quaint. If you love all things British literature, I definitely recommend you pick up this series. I have nothing but high praise for this series. It's just, I think it's perfection from start to finish. Every book that is just so enjoyable. I mean, I had one book in the series that I didn't enjoy as much, but it was literally one book, and even that one book in the series, it's like, it was still better than a lot of stuff that's written nowadays. So you guys, moving into the books that were published here in the year of 2020, let's get going. At number 5, I have My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, and oh boy, this is perhaps the most difficult book I had to get through this year, but I still really enjoyed it. I don't know if enjoyed is the proper word to describe for this book, but this book is definitely the type of book that I spent a lot of time, even after I was done reading it, I spent a lot of time just really kind of thinking about it, and it definitely just, it still left an impression on me, because it's a very dark and heavy book. It can be very uncomfortable. It's not the most pleasant of reading experiences. But yeah, if you don't know what My Dark Vanessa is about, it's about a young girl named Vanessa. When she's 15 years old, she has an affair with her 42-year-old English teacher. So then years later, when she's like in her mid-30s, she's thinking back on her time with her English teacher and kind of realizing some things. And also recently, a student of his, like a student that he's teaching now, is accusing him of like assault and rape and whatnot. So this other victim is trying to come to Vanessa saying, hey, you had an affair with him, but, I think you were abused and raped by him as well, and I think you should come out and tell your story and accuse him of some stuff as well, And this puts Vanessa in a very awkward position, and it causes her to reflect, essentially, on her relationship with, when she was 15, forcing her to think about that time and what power and control did she technically have during that time? Was she a victim? Was she raped? Was it consensual? It really is causing her to think about like really key specific moments and kind of reevaluate kind of her role in some of the things that happened. And yeah, is she a victim or not, you know? So it is. This book really makes you question, really makes you think, really puts you, you know, on various different sides and positions to this type of story. And it's really fascinating, really interesting, really hard, really uncomfortable, but I still just thoroughly loved this book, and I thought it was incredibly well written. At number 4, of course, I have to have a Ruth Ware book on this list, and this is One by One by Ruth Ware, her very latest book. I've just been loving Ruth Ware, you guys. This book, in my review on Goodreads, I definitely said this is not one of my my highly most favorite by Ruth Ware. I definitely prefer other books by her. But I still really liked this. I still really like this. I like the concept and the things going on. I particularly just really like Ruth Ware's thrillers for some reason, because sometimes I can have a hard time with certain thrillers because sometimes they can kind of read as very standard and bland. But Ruth Ware always kind of manages to do something that I just particularly really like her style with thrillers and whatnot. So yeah, this book, we follow people who work at a company called Snoop, and Snoop is essentially an app where you can snoop on people's music choices and music preferences. So these people who created the app, they all get together in this ski resort up in the French Alps. And the reason they're all meeting up is because there's a potential buyout offer that's about to happen. So all of the employees and the people who founded the company, they all have to make some pretty huge decisions here. So in the meantime, when they're up in the French Alps, like I said, it's snowy and whatnot. Of course there's an avalanche. Of course. There's an avalanche that happens. They're stranded off from humanity, essentially. No electricity, no way to communicate with the outside world. And little by little, one by one, if you will, some from their group start either disappearing or dying. It has a very and then there were none vibe to it. I really liked what was going on in this book. Like I said, there's an avalanche that happens. I felt cold. I was freezing the entire time I was reading this book. That's always a good thing when you're reading like a book like this. If a book can have that sort of feel to you as you're reading, I think that's always a good thing, because I felt like I was freezing. I was hungry a lot of times when I was reading this book. So I did. I really like this book by Ruth Ware, and as always, I'm always highly looking forward to her next book and what she's going to come up with. At number 3, we have Chain of Iron, which is the first book in the Last Hours trilogy by Cassandra Clare, and this is part of Cassandra Clare's greater Shadowhunter universe, if you will. The big thing you need to know about this particular book is that this is essentially the sequel to the prequel series called the Infernal Devices. And the Infernal Devices, we followed a group of teenagers who were living in Victorian London. So this new trilogy is set, about maybe 2 decades or so after the events of the Infernal Devices, now following the children of all of those characters. And yeah, if you don't know, if you're not really familiar with the Shadowhunter world, the books usually focus on children or teenagers who have like angelic blood running through their veins, which gives them like superpowers, like super strength and speed and whatnot. And they fight vampires and werewolves and demons and whatnot, all that good stuff. I loved this book, you guys. I was very anxious and nervous about it because the Infernal Devices is just one of my top favorite trilogies. I love those books. So I went into this kind of a little skeptical but excited, and I was very impressed with this book. It kind of exceeded my expectations in some ways. I loved the characters. I loved being back in this kind of, familiar world, if you will. Yeah, a beautiful cover, you guys. I always love all these Cassandra Clare covers. They're always so beautiful. And yeah, it's a beast of a book. But what I always love about Cassandra Clare is that she always takes her time with her narrative, you know, setting up the story and the world building and really, really getting you attached to these characters. So that way when some horrible stuff happens, you're devastated. And I just always love that about her books. And yeah, this book is no different. So yeah, I love this first book to this trilogy, and I'm highly just looking forward to book 2. At number 2, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This book is the most bizarre thing you are ever going to read in your life, but bizarre, I think, in the best possible way. So let me try to talk about this book. It is so difficult to talk about this book, you guys, because if I give away too much, you know, it's going to kind of verge into spoiler territory. So what I'm going to be probably saying about this book is going to probably be very, very vague. But this book is meant to be vague and mysterious. It's deliberately kind of written that way, I think. What you need to know about this book: we follow a young man named Piranesi, and he lives in this world that's just kind of full of endless halls and endless corridors. There's just statues lining the walls everywhere, and like somehow there's an ocean imprisoned within all of this. And Piranesi lives all by himself. You quickly kind of get the idea he's very humble and intelligent, resourceful. He's very curious. And the only person that he interacts with throughout this book is a man who he calls the Other, and this man only comes to visit him like twice a week. And the Other is constantly saying to Piranesi, oh, I need you to help me, you know, kind of learn more about this world, because he's kind of trying to research this world and whatnot. And yeah, he keeps saying to Piranesi, what does he call it? He calls it that they're looking for a great and secret knowledge. What does that even mean? You know, Piranesi doesn't know what it means, and we the reader don't know what it means. So what I loved about this book is you're right there alongside Piranesi the whole damn book, you know, unraveling every little clue, every little detail. That makes this book so fun and enjoyable, I think. Because as he's learning stuff, you're learning it as well. This is just such a good book, you guys. Like I said, it's very bizarre and weird, and it can be very confusing initially until you do start getting some of those little reveals, and then things are like, oh, okay, I get it now. But yeah, I definitely recommend this. If Susanna Clarke famously wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. If you loved Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, there's a pretty good chance you're going to enjoy this just as much. And at number 1, you guys, is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Woo! I think this book is probably on just about everybody's list this year, let's be real. This is what you got to know about Mexican Gothic, you guys. It follows a young woman who gets a letter from her cousin, who is out in the Mexican countryside with her husband. And in her cousin's letter, she's pleading for her cousin to come to her and rescue her, essentially, because she feels like her husband is poisoning her. So our main protagonist, she heads down to the Mexican countryside where her cousin's husband's ancestral home is. And it's here that it's like she's trying to unravel what is going on here. The people that live at this home are very weird and peculiar. She can't even quite figure out what's going on with her cousin, why her cousin is acting the way that she is. Is her husband trying to kill her? Who knows? And yeah, this house is just falling apart. It's rotten, and there's mushrooms and mold literally growing everywhere, every little crevice. And that's kind of really all I can say about this book, you guys, because when you kind of get some of the big reveals that go on in this book, it's absolutely mind-blowing and insane. I just really like this book. This is probably the most unique book I read this year. Our leading characters are Mexican, takes place in the Mexican countryside. This definitely provides for a unique kind of flavor to this world that's really different, you know, kind of a cultural thing. There's a lot of cultural background. There's a lot of stuff that has to do with, inferiority versus superiority. There's some characters who are very sexist in this, and our main character, she has to kind of deal with all this crap from some of the men. Yeah, there's a big family secret lurking in the background. I just really liked this book. It's almost kind of comparable to something like Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, but it definitely has its own little twists and turns, that are really surprising, and jaw dropping. And I love this book. Yeah, guys, I freaking loved it. I didn't know what to expect. I'm really glad I didn't get spoiled about anything. But yeah, if you've not read this book, what are you waiting for? There is so much hype surrounding this book, and I think you're probably going to enjoy it. So you guys, that is it for my favorite books that I read in the year 2020. I am looking forward to the year of 2021 and discovering some new books. And as always, you guys, what books did you guys enjoy in the year of 2020? What were some of your top favorites, the books that are going to stay with you forever? Just let me know so maybe I can go check those out as well. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.